The 49ers travel to Seattle later in the day for that week 6 game. Here it is, week 6, 49ers Seahawks, 5:15 start. That's October 10th. They will travel up there today. I'm about ready to jump on a plane and go to Seattle as well for a game that really is a pivotal game, I think, for the 49ers in a lot of ways. Certainly not a must win, but Nick Bosa, George Kittle, and others were talking about, yeah, it's probably not a must win, but the 49ers are approaching it like a must win. And I think that's pretty much how they have to approach every game this season from here on out, with a 2-3 record heading up to Seattle, facing the Seahawks, who lead the NFC West with a 3-2 record. So some loose ends to tie up from yesterday. The first thing was after the firing of Robert Saleh with the Jets. Obviously, a lot of people wondering about Saleh and his future. Might he come back to the 49ers? I put out there that, things do fall apart for the Jets the rest of the season, and Jeff Ulbrich doesn't get the permanent job there. Would he be a candidate for the 49ers defensive coordinator position? And I would say absolutely. I would almost put Ulbrich over Saleh for that job, just to see if the pieces fit for both sides. But I don't think anybody on the 49ers has given up on Nick Sorensen. In fact, I asked Shanahan about Sorensen on Tuesday, and I know a lot of people are going to say, well, what's he going to say about Sorensen? But what I found interesting was just the level of detail as far as when I asked Shanahan about the job that Sorensen's doing. He said, I think Nick is doing a real good job. He said, I've been impressed with him from the beginning. Each week, I like how he handles the defensive staff, how he sets up practices. I liked his game plans, and I like how he's called it. So he said he's been real happy with Nick Sorensen so far. And I think, again, people are just going to take that with a grain of salt, and they're going to say, well, what about the stats? Well, I really don't think that the stats are anything that coaches evaluate other coaches on. It's the process. And for Sorensen, a first-time defensive coordinator, it's not like he just convinced Kyle Shanahan in 1 2-hour interview that he should get that job. Granted, 49ers did look at other spots, just like they looked for other people when they eventually went with Robert Saleh in 2017. It was, Steve Spagnuolo. It was Bill Belichick. It was Jeff Ulbrich from the Jets. And so ultimately, the decision was made for Sorensen to be the defensive coordinator. And pretty much after that decision was made, 49ers had Brandon Staley in the building, and Kyle Shanahan thought at that point that Staley would be a very good resource for Sorensen. Of course, Staley had been a defensive coordinator with the Rams. He was the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. So again, it's not going to happen. Robert Saleh is going to take the rest of the year off. There's no question about that. But just the suggestion that they could or would even want to bring in Saleh at this point to serve in some sort of capacity with the 49ers, it doesn't make sense from the standpoint of, you've all heard the saying, too many chefs in the kitchen. That's definitely what this would be. Basically, if you have 3 defensive coordinators on your staff, you don't have any defensive coordinators on your staff. I was also able to talk to Nick Bosa and ask him about some of the comments he made following the game on Sunday against the Cardinals. And Nick is a joy to talk to, because he is so honest and he tells you exactly what he feels, and he's very thoughtful as well. And one of the things that he told me was that he says he feels like the 49ers have been, in his words, crushing the scouted run. So during the course of the week, when Nick Sorensen and Chris Kocurek and the entire 49ers defensive staff bring the list of plays, or, hey, this is what this team likes to do, he said the 49ers have been absolutely crushing that. But there's always going to be unscouted looks. And it was his belief that the 49ers did not adjust well enough to those unscouted looks, whether that's the players applying the rules that they have on any particular run plays, or the coaching staff kind of reminding them or making those sideline adjustments. So his thought was just that they have to account better for the unscouted looks that every team's going to throw at them, including Seattle on Thursday night. And also, he talked about just tackling better. When Nick Sorensen was asked about, I think he was kind of asked broadly or about Nick Bosa's comments, what he said that they did change up some things, whether it was too high or they brought some pressure, and that they did talk about what was happening on the sideline. And he didn't think that there were any breakdowns in communication and that they weren't, that they didn't properly adjust to some things. So, anyway, I guess just the fact that we're talking about this says that there are some issues with the 49ers defense. But again, these are things that they're common, I think, with every team every year. And so, again, in talking to guys in the locker room and hearing what Kyle Shanahan had to say, it sounds like there is a lot of confidence in Nick Sorensen behind the scenes. Again, you're going to say, what are they supposed to say? But I do get the sense that when talking to Shanahan, he's not a really good liar. And so you can really kind of feel whenever he says something with not a whole lot of conviction, or just he won't say things that he doesn't believe. So again, read that how you want, but I don't think that there's any chance of, or let's just, I was going to say, any chance of any kind of change for a defense coordinator during the season. That would be absolutely shocking to me. But this season is going to have a long way to play out. So, really, even looking ahead to next offseason and whether Nick Sorensen is one and done, that's all very premature. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe. We're closing in on 7,000 subscribers. So I really appreciate that. And comment and like and do everything else. This game, I think, is a huge game for Brock Purdy because he has been so good, so spot on since he's been the 49ers quarterback. And he's coming off a game that, frankly, it wasn't that good. I just don't think that his decision making was crisp. I don't know that he saw things the way he should have. And hey, I've been giving glowing praise to Brock Purdy, but I will always kind of tell you exactly what I feel, because I could say that a player is great, is great, is great, but if he has one bad game, it's still worth pointing out. It doesn't mean I think he's any less of a good player, it just means he had a bad game. But now it's incumbent upon him to bounce back from that. And this is a situation where I think it's going to tell a lot. And there will be so many X's and O's and scheming things that I don't think anybody other than a trained coach will be able to pick up on during the game, and probably won't even be able to do that because of the TV copy. But I just think back to last season, the team that has given, or the team that gave Brock Purdy the most problems so far in his NFL career were the Baltimore Ravens. And last year, they came up with 4 interceptions, all I think for different reasons. But Mike Macdonald, the Baltimore Ravens defensive coordinator, put together a really good plan to take away the middle of the field, kind of clog up those passing lanes, get their hands on some footballs, bring blitzes at different angles. And all that led to 4 interceptions. Brock Purdy on Christmas night last year was considered the front runner for the MVP. But after that game, he was no longer talked about as the front runner for the MVP. That was basically the evening that Lamar Jackson won the MVP award. So when you think about what teams have done against the 49ers this year in taking away those in-breaking routes and those passes between the numbers, I think a lot of teams have used that Baltimore Ravens blueprint and the Kansas City Chiefs blueprint in order to kind of slow down the 49ers offense, or at least make Brock Purdy hold the ball for a tick longer than he wants to. So with Mike McDonald being the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. I think this is big from a technical standpoint, from a tactical standpoint, from the thought that Brock Purdy has been seeing this stuff. He'll continue to see more of this stuff until he proves that he has the answers. Kyle Shanahan has the answers to combat what defenses are doing. So a very big challenge from Mike McDonald, the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. Now, granted, Seattle does not have the kind of players that the Ravens had on their defense last year, guys like Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen. Of course, Patrick Queen isn't with the Ravens anymore this season either. He's with the Steelers and also those guys up front. So I did ask Purdy about just diving into the Seattle scheme. First time the 49ers will have faced Seattle without Pete Carroll as head coach and running that system that Pete Carroll likes. And so what Purdy said was the scheme is very similar, obviously, to what the Ravens did last year, the way they're calling plays. He said the personnel is different, so they've got to know what to look for in certain situations. He did say that he did study, has spent a lot of time studying the game film against the Ravens last year, and just to kind of see with what McDonald figured out of how he wanted to attack the 49ers offense and their scheme. So he said that he went back and looked at the decisions and he hopes to learn from it. I think I'm in the minority when it comes to the 49ers offensive line. I have very much been on record saying that I don't think the 49ers offensive line is as bad as a lot of 49er fans believe it is. And I would say that it's, somewhere in the middle of the pack or even a little bit higher, a little bit better than the middle of the pack, which still should be good enough for this offense to function. I just don't believe that you can have a guy who's putting up rushing yards like Jordan Mason. I don't think you can have a guy who's had enough time to throw and has put up a lot of passing yards like Brock Purdy and not have a good offensive line or a decent offensive line. And I've cited these numbers before, but I'll go back to PFF because they're the only organization I know of that looks at every game, every team, and it tries to grade all these players on a level playing field. I know it's impossible to know exactly what blocking schemes are, what's being asked of the particular offensive lineman, but they give it a shot and it's probably as good as anything. So 49ers, as far as pass blocking, according to PFF, ranks 13th in the NFL. As far as run blocking, they rank second in the NFL. And there hasn't been one 49ers offensive lineman who has yielded more than one sack this season. Aaron Banks, Colton McKivitz, Trent Williams have all allowed one sack, according to PFF's grading. And so only 3 sacks allowed by the offensive line. A lot of the sacks have been either coverage sacks or a player, not an offensive lineman, who's responsible, or just a scheme like it wasn't a sack, but the hit on Purdy where the ball fluttered up and it was a game-clinching interception for the Cardinals. That was basically out schemed or Purdy just not finding George Kittle, the hot read, quick enough. Now, where the 49ers can tighten it up, of course, would be the pressures allowed. McKivitz has surrendered 15 pressures, followed by Banks and Williams with 11 apiece, and then Dominic Pooney and Jake Brendel with 9 apiece. Okay, let's talk about the 49ers injury situation going into this game. Talanoa Hufanga, he's going to be out at least a month, probably more, with torn ligaments in his wrist. Kicker Jake Moody has a right ankle sprain, and he's going to be out a month or more as well. 49ers did sign Matthew Wright, a veteran kicker, off the street. He has some experience, and for his career, he's 40 of 47 on field goals, including 6 of 9 from beyond 69 yards. Other people who didn't practice, and later on the day on Wednesday, the 49ers will release their official injury report with the outs, doubtfuls, questionables, all that. Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, he's not going to play in this game, linebacker. So look for more D winners in this game. And going back to Talanoa Hufanga, it means Malik Mustafa will get another start as he tries to kind of solidify that role, or he already has solidified that role as the number three safety on the 49ers defense, but somebody who's going to be counted on to be a big time player and a starter for the 49ers in the future. And then Jordan Elliott did not practice on Tuesday due to a knee injury. Now, Hufanga and Moody are both candidates to go on injured reserve, but that's something the 49ers haven't decided whether they want to do or not, because you only get 8 players placed on injured reserve who can come back during the course of the season. If you make it to the playoffs, you get 2 more of those spots. So my guess would be, one of those spots for the playoffs potentially is Javon Hargrave. There's a chance that the 49ers season does last long and they do make a deep playoff run that Hargrave could come back. Now, there's no big urgency for the 49ers to put one of those players or both of those players on injured reserve, because I don't think you want to use one of those 8 spots if you don't have anybody that you can bring up to the 53-man roster and play. So in other words, you're not just going to elevate a guy or promote a guy to the 53-man roster if he's not going to be in uniform on game days. And this week, the 49ers have until 1 p.m. Thursday to make roster moves, whether that's elevating guys from the practice squad or putting on IR and bringing somebody up to the 53-man roster. The one person I think that could be coming up as an elevation would be rookie safety Jalen Mahoney. He's already been up once this season, and a player can be brought up, elevated from the practice squad 3 times before he must be on the 53-man in order to get a uniform and appear in a game this season. So last week, the 49ers brought up T.Y. McGill and Trent Taylor. And so we'll see what they do with the defensive linemen. They needed those 9 defensive linemen because of the heat. We'll see what they do on Thursday. Cowing is back. Jacob Cowing is back. So he'll be, I would assume, be back returning punts. So Trent Taylor probably does not figure to be elevated. So on the list of players who have already returned off of IR would be Kalia Davis. That's one. So they have 7 more spots remaining. And interestingly enough, this kind of seems like a weird rule, but when the 49ers elevate or open the practice window for Ricky Pearsall, and assuming he's on the 53-man roster at some point here in the near future, he would actually count as one of those spots. So even though he's not on injured reserve, he's on non-football injury, that would still apply to him. Other guys to keep an eye on for the future who could come back off injured reserve and who the 49ers believe will be coming back off injured reserve: Christian McCaffrey, John Feliciano, Yetur Gross-Matos, and then potentially Ambry Thomas, although I just don't see that there's a spot for him on the 53-man roster right now. So that's why the 49ers are kind of holding out and trying to determine whether to put Talanoa Hufanga on IR and also Jake Moody on IR. Well, we'll come back at you later, maybe with more injury reports, or certainly as I sit down to do my 5 to watch. But that's it for right now.